Elena was 22 years old, a final year student at the university. She was bright, hardworking, and known for always speaking her mind, but life had not been kind to her. She came from a poor background and had carried responsibilities much bigger than her age. Her father had died when she was still a little girl, leaving her and her mother to survive on their own. Since then, her mother, Mrs. Rose, had been everything: parent, teacher, and friend. Elena grew up seeing her mother struggle to put food on the table, taking small jobs here and there. It was Mrs. Rose's sacrifices that kept her in school. Elena was also an only child. There were no brothers or sisters to lean on. She carried her burdens quietly, trying to make her mother proud. She studied hard, worked part-time whenever she could, and prayed that one day life would smile on them. But poverty pressed in on every side. Her scholarship money had been delayed for months. The little she earned from cleaning jobs and tutoring younger students was barely enough to cover food and transport. Even her landlord had begun threatening to throw them out if the rent was not paid soon. Then came the call that shook her world. It was from the hospital. The nurse's voice was urgent. "Your mother's condition has worsened. Please come quickly." Elena's heart raced. She grabbed her bag and left campus at once. Tears blurred her eyes as she boarded a bus, whispering prayers under her breath. "Please, God, not my mother. Not now. She's all I have," she whispered, her voice breaking. At the hospital, Elena hurried down the white corridor and pushed into the ward. Mrs. Rose lay weak on the bed, her breathing heavy and shallow. Elena's hands trembled as she reached for her mother's hand. The doctor came to her side, his face grave. "Your mother needs urgent treatment," he said softly. "She requires imported drugs and special care. The cost is very high. Without it, she may not survive." "How much?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 300,000, the doctor replied, "and it must be paid quickly." Elena felt her knees weaken. She had only a small amount saved from her part-time jobs. Even that wasn't enough to cover rent, let alone such a huge hospital bill. Desperation filled her chest like fire. "There has to be another way," she said to herself, fighting back tears. "I can't lose her. I won't." In her hopeless search, Elena went to see Mr. Thompson, a local moneylender. She explained her situation, her voice breaking, and begged for help. But Mr. Thompson leaned back in his chair and sneered. 300,000 for you? You should know better. What do you even have to offer as collateral?" "Please, sir," Elena whispered, tears in her eyes. "I will pay little by little. It's my mother's life." He laughed cruelly. "Your background is poor. Your father is dead. You have nothing. Even you are barely feeding as it is, and you dare to ask me for such money? You should be paying me for the insult." His words cut her like a blade. Elena left his office slowly, her heart pounding with fear and shame. But deep inside, she swore to herself she would not give up. Her mother's life depended on her. She walked slowly out of Mr. Thompson's office, his cruel laughter still ringing in her ears. The night felt heavier than ever. Her eyes stung with tears as she thought of her mother lying weak in the hospital. She knew she couldn't go home empty-handed. "At least I can buy some small medicines," she told herself. She hurried to the nearest pharmacy, clutching the little money she had left. The place was busy. People lined up in the late-night queue, some buying baby supplies, others picking up painkillers. Elena waited patiently, whispering prayers. When it was finally her turn, she placed the items on the counter, just basic drugs for fever and body pain. The cashier swiped her card. The machine beeped. "Insufficient funds," the cashier said flatly. Elena's heart sank. She tried again, hoping for a miracle, but the same message flashed back. Her hands shook. She could feel people behind her growing restless. "Miss, please step aside if you don't have the money," the cashier said impatiently. Before Elena could speak, a calm male voice spoke from behind her. "Add it to mine. I'll cover it." She turned, surprised. The man was tall, well-dressed, and carried himself with quiet authority. He looked out of place in such a crowded pharmacy at that hour. In his hand was a small pack of paracetamol. It was Alexander Knight, a billionaire from the famous Knight family. He had been out with some of his friends for a late-night snack and had stopped by quickly to grab painkillers. To him, it was a simple act, nothing worth attention. The cashier nodded, took his card, and processed both payments. Alexander quietly collected his own item and stepped aside, avoiding the stares. Alina clutched the small bag of medicine, her face flushed with relief and embarrassment. She rushed out of the pharmacy. Outside, under the dim light of the pharmacy canopy, she found him standing alone, scrolling through his phone. She walked up to him slowly. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice trembling. I don't know how to repay you." Alexander looked up briefly, then shrugged as if it was nothing. "Don't bother, just take care." Elena blinked. "Still, I wish I could return the favor."
He gave a faint smile. "You don't need to, but here." He handed her a small card with his assistant's contact. "If you ever really need help, reach out." Before she could say another word, he nodded politely and walked toward the waiting car where his friend Marcus stood. Marcus, who had known Alexander for years, noticed something unusual in his friend's eyes. Alexander was not a man who paid attention to strangers, much less a struggling young woman. Yet tonight he had. Interesting, Marcus thought quietly. Alexander doesn't just look at any woman. Maybe this girl is different. That same night, as Elena sat by her mother's bedside, she tried calling old classmates and distant relatives, begging for help. "Please, Sarah, it's my mother. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't life or death," she pleaded into the phone. "I'm sorry, Elena. I just can't right now. Things are tight for me, too." Every call ended with excuses or rejection. Her phone battery drained, her hope drained with it. Sometime after midnight, a message popped up from an unknown number. "We met earlier at the pharmacy. If you need help, come to this hotel lounge tomorrow. One night, no strings. I will give any amount you ask for." Elena froze, staring at the screen. Her first thought was shame. Her second was anger. "How could someone think I would sell myself like that?" she said aloud, her hands shaking. "What kind of woman does he think I am?" She put the phone down, refusing to even reply. But as the hours crawled by, every call she made ended the same way. "Sorry, I can't help." Her savings were nothing compared to what the hospital demanded. She looked at her mother, who winced even in her sleep, breathing weakly. Her heart battled with itself. The stranger had been handsome and kind in the pharmacy, but this offer felt wrong. Shame burned inside her, but desperation whispered louder. "Is this really what it's come to?" she whispered to herself, tears streaming down her face. "God, forgive me, but I can't let her die. I can't." Finally, with trembling fingers, Elena picked up her phone and typed a short reply. "I will come tomorrow." Elena barely slept that night. The message on her phone replayed in her head again and again. Her heart told her to stay away, but her mind reminded her of her mother struggling to breathe. "I have to do this," she told herself in the mirror that morning. "There's no other way. I'll do it once, get the money, and never look back." By morning, she had fully made up her mind. There was no turning back now. Meanwhile, later that evening, Marcus made sure Alexander was present at the private lounge. He had told Alexander about the message he had sent to Elena the day before, hoping his friend would at least listen. Alexander didn't argue much, but his face was cold and unreadable. When Elena arrived, she was taken upstairs to a quiet, luxurious private lounge. The lights were soft, the furniture polished, and the air heavy with silence. She felt completely out of place, clutching her small bag tightly against her chest. Alexander was seated on one of the couches, his posture calm but distant.
His eyes met hers briefly, then shifted away as though he wanted to keep this only business. "Sit," he said simply, his voice even. Elena sat, trying not to tremble. She took a deep breath and spoke firmly, wanting her words to be clear. "I got your message and I understand what you want, but there must be rules. No violence, no filming, no drugs. You transfer the full payment first, 300,000, and after this, no future contact. We forget it happened." For a moment, Alexander's cold face softened. He nodded. "Agreed," he said. Elena was surprised he had agreed so easily to the amount she mentioned. "Guess life isn't as hard for some people as it is for me," she thought to herself. Marcus, standing quietly at the side, watched the exchange. He knew Alexander well. His friend never entertained women lightly, yet there was something different in the way he was listening to this poor student. He had looked her up earlier and discovered she needed the money, which is why he wasn't surprised she came, but he was surprised Alexander had gone with his idea so easily. He said nothing. Then finally, Alexander and Elena introduced themselves properly. "My name's Elena. I'm a final-year accounting student," she said quietly. "Alexander Clyte," he replied. Elena froze. She had heard the name 1,000 times. Girls in her class wouldn't stop talking about the billionaire heir from the Knight family, admiring his wealth, his looks, his mysterious nature. And here he was, right in front of her. She glanced at him again. Truly, his appearance was worth the praise. Broad shoulders, calm eyes, a presence that commanded respect. "Perish that thought, Elena," she told herself silently. "The further away he stays, the better. I didn't come here for admiration." Alexander transferred the money. Then, almost as if to seal the deal, he took out a sheet of paper and signed a short handwritten note, promising no future claims, no strings. Elena folded it carefully into her bag. "Thank you for this," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know what this looks like, but I need you to know I'm only doing this for my mother." Later, they left together for the hotel. Elena went into the bathroom first. She stood under the shower for a long time, trying to steady her racing heart. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. "Just get through tonight. Tomorrow, everything goes back to normal." When she came out, she found Alexander waiting. Their eyes met, and in that moment the distance broke. He kissed her. Though nervous and inexperienced, Elena allowed herself to be led. Alexander was gentle, taking the lead, and the night passed with a mix of hesitation and passion that neither of them had expected. By morning, Elena woke before Alexander. The room was quiet, sunlight slipping through the curtains. She looked at him for one brief second, then quickly turned away. "Don't think about it," she told herself firmly. "This never happened." She freshened up, washed her face, picked up her bag, and quietly left. At the hospital, she rushed straight to her mother's bed. The exhaustion and weight of everything overcame her, and she collapsed beside Mrs. Rose, clutching her hand. Her tears fell silently. "I got the money, Mama. You're going to be okay." A few days passed after the payment. Slowly, Mrs. Rose's condition began to stabilize. The doctors said the drugs were working, and for the first time in weeks, Elena felt hope. When her mother asked how the money had come, Elena smiled softly and lied. "An old classmate helped me, Mama. Someone kind enough to lend me the money." Her mother squeezed her hand weakly, whispering, "God bless them. May they never lack." Elena forced a smile, but her chest tightened with guilt. "I can never tell her the truth," she thought. "She would never forgive me or herself." Meanwhile, Alexander sat alone in his study. He had not been himself since that night. When he woke up the next morning, he had seen the faint stain on the sheets and realized something he hadn't expected. Elena had been a virgin. The discovery unsettled him. He had assumed she was just another girl chasing quick money, but this was different. It explained the nervousness in her eyes, the way she had set strict boundaries, the way she had left so quickly without looking back at his wealth. For the first time in a long while, Alexander felt something stir in him. Not guilt, not pride, but interest. He called Marcus. "That woman you set me up with? Find out about her," Alexander said simply. Marcus was used to his friend being guarded around women, so he did not question it. After digging around quietly, Marcus came back with the report. Elena Stevens, 22, a final-year student, brilliant and hardworking. Her father died years ago, and her mother was in the city hospital fighting for her life. She was desperate, with no other way to raise the money. Alexander sat back silent. "So she wasn't a prostitute," he said quietly. "She was a daughter fighting to save her mother's life." He closed his eyes and let out a long breath. "Delete everything," he told Marcus firmly. "Every message, every record, and never speak of this again." Marcus nodded. "Understood." On the other side of the city, Elena folded the handwritten note Alexander had signed and tucked it safely into her small bag. "I'll keep this," she told herself, "not because I want to remember, but because it's my protection." At night, when she lay beside her mother's bed, her thoughts drifted back to him, the man with cold eyes and quiet power. "He belongs to another world," she told herself. "The further away he stays from me, the better." Yet deep inside, she knew something had changed. As days passed, Elena tried to rebuild her life the best she could. With her mother now more stable at the hospital, she returned to her classes. She took on extra shifts, tutoring younger students and cleaning offices at night. "That part of my life is closed," she told herself firmly. "I can't look back." But no matter how hard she tried, sometimes her thoughts drifted back to that night and the man whose world was far beyond hers. She quickly shook it off whenever it happened. On the other side of the city, Alexander found himself restless. He had tried to stay away, reminding himself of Elena's firm words, no attachments, no future contact. But the more he tried to forget, the more her face returned to him, the honesty in her voice, the way she had walked away without a second glance at his wealth. Finally, one evening, he picked up his phone and dialed her number.
Elena saw the call flash across her screen. Her chest tightened. Why is he calling? She wondered, her heart racing. We had an agreement. For a moment, she considered answering, but then she remembered her mother's words about dignity, about not letting shame follow her. "I disregarded those words once," she said to herself. "I won't do it again." With trembling hands, she blocked the number completely. Alexander stared at his phone in disbelief when the line went dead. He tried again and saw it had been blocked. Shock turned into intrigue. Women usually chased after him, yet here was one who waved him off so easily. For the first time in years, Alexander smiled faintly. "Interesting," he muttered to himself. The next day, Alexander returned to the office. The weight of the company rested heavily on him. His uncle, Uncle Richard, was waiting for him in the boardroom. Uncle Richard's son, Daniel, had been whispering among shareholders, stirring doubt. "The shareholders aren't satisfied, Alexander," Uncle Richard said firmly. "You should put in more effort. This company carries the Knight name, and we cannot afford to look weak." Alexander's eyes hardened. "With all respect, Uncle, I have been the backbone of this company for years. If not for me, Knight Corporation would not be standing as strong as it is today." Uncle Richard pursed his lips, but said no more. That evening, Alexander returned to the Knight mansion. The house was filled with wealth and luxury, but to him it felt empty. Since his parents' death in a car accident when he was just 15, the mansion had never truly felt like home. The only one who cared for him with genuine love was his grandmother, Grandmother Catherine. She had raised him with so much care after the tragedy, and even now she remained his anchor. When Alexander entered the living room, she was seated by the window, knitting softly. She looked up and studied his face. "You are troubled," she said gently. Alexander sighed and sat across from her.
He didn't tell her what was truly bothering him, but she continued anyway. When you do wrong for a right reason, don't let pride keep you there. Learn from it and let it guide you. Alexander nodded quietly. He did not speak, but her words sank deep into him. For the first time that day, he felt a small measure of peace. Meanwhile, Elena's life was about to take an unexpected turn. One afternoon, she was walking home from campus when she saw an elderly woman struggling with her shopping bag. The woman had paused by the roadside, her breathing heavy. Without a second thought, Elena hurried over. "Let me help you, Ma," she said kindly, lifting the heavy bag from the woman's hands. The woman looked at her with surprise, then smiled warmly. "Thank you, my child. May God bless you." Elena smiled back. "It's nothing, Ma. You shouldn't be carrying this by yourself. I can give you my number to help you run errands any time you need me." "I don't have money for that," the woman said softly with a sly smile. "You don't have to pay me," Elena replied, smiling back at the woman. "I won't be able to sleep well at night if I collect money for running errands for an elder." They walked together for a short while, chatting softly. When they reached the side of the road, the woman told her to go ahead as she was waiting for someone. Elena handed the bag over. The woman patted her hand with gratitude. "You have a good heart," she said gently. Elena nodded, then hurried away, not knowing she had just touched someone who would soon change her life. She had no idea the simple woman she helped was none other than Grandmother Catherine of the Knight family. A few days later, Elena entered a high-end boutique. Her final year presentation was coming up, and she wanted to at least look professional. She could not afford to buy much, but she hoped to window shop, maybe find something simple within her reach. As soon as she stepped in, the staff gave her disapproving looks. One of them whispered loudly, "These poor people will come here and waste our time trying on clothes they can't afford." Elena swallowed hard but ignored the words. "I have every right to be here," she told herself quietly, holding her head high. She picked a plain blouse and a skirt to try on, telling herself not to be embarrassed. But when she came out of the fitting room, the whispers grew louder. "Look at her shoes. She doesn't belong here. She should try the thrift store." Elena's face burned, but she stood tall, refusing to let them see her shame. Just then, the door opened, and in walked an elegant older woman dressed in a simple but rich-looking wrapper. The staff's tone changed instantly. "Welcome, Ma," they chorused, bowing.
The woman looked around, and then her eyes fell on Elena. She smiled widely. "It's you," she said, walking forward. Elena blinked in surprise. "Ma?" The woman took her hand. "You helped me the other day with my bag. I told myself I would not forget your face. What a pleasant surprise." The staff looked shocked. They hadn't expected the older woman to know her. Grandmother Catherine turned to them sharply. "And you, don't you ever look down on people. Wealth can vanish, but kindness never fades. Treat every customer with respect." The room fell silent. She then turned back to Elena, her eyes full of warmth. "My dear, take whatever you tried on. In fact, take everything that fits you. I will pay for it." Elena stared at the woman in shock for a few minutes. The old woman she had helped looked nothing like the sophisticated woman standing before her now, commanding so much respect. She must be someone powerful, she thought to herself. "No, Ma, please," Elena replied finally, her eyes filled with shock. "I didn't come to trouble you. I can't accept this." "Nonsense," Grandmother Catherine replied. "You have a very kind heart, and that makes you special. Don't let anyone make you feel less." Elena nodded and accepted the clothes with gratitude, tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Ma. I don't even know what to say. I have been looking for where to intern, but I never expected this." Then Grandmother Catherine pulled out a small card and pressed it into Elena's hand. "Come for a training interview at KC. I believe you will fit in well there." Elena's mouth fell open.
KC? You mean the one and only KC? She whispered. She had been searching everywhere for a place to intern for her final year, but never dreamed of such an opportunity. Thank you, Ma. I don't even know what to say. I have been looking for where to intern, but I never expected this, Elena said with tears in her eyes. Grandmother Catherine smiled and touched her shoulder gently. Say nothing, my dear. Just be yourself. They bid farewell, and as Elena walked out of the boutique with her new clothes, her heart swelled with a hope she hadn't felt in a very long time. The following day, Elena dressed as neatly as she could in one of the new clothes Grandmother Catherine had bought for her. Her hands shook as she held the invitation card. KC Corporation, it said. She had been too excited before to even ask what KC stood for. When she reached the gleaming glass building, her heart beat faster. This place looks like a palace, she whispered to herself, taking a deep breath. She walked through the main entrance, clutching her bag tightly, whispering a prayer for courage. As she was led down the wide corridor by a secretary, several men in dark suits moved past, escorting someone important. Elena stepped aside quickly, but when her eyes lifted, she froze. It was him, Alexander Knight. Their eyes met. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. She realized with shock, KC stood for Knight Corporation. This was his company. The internship offer Grandmother Catherine had given her was leading her right back into his world. I hadn't thought that far, she told herself, panic rising. I was only happy for the chance. I certainly didn't imagine I would see him here like this. Alexander, too, froze for a split second, but quickly masked his surprise. His face returned to his usual cold calm, as though nothing had happened. Moments later, she was ushered into his office for the interview. The room was large, bright, and quiet. He sat across from her, his gaze unreadable. He began asking her questions, serious questions about integrity, handling pressure, and how she would deal with responsibility. Elena answered with honesty and confidence. I believe integrity is non-negotiable, she said firmly. Without it, no amount of skill or intelligence matters. When he switched to practical accounting questions, she answered brilliantly, explaining calculations and procedures she had learned in class. For the first time, a flicker of admiration showed in his eyes. He leaned back slightly, nodding. You are prepared, he said. Elena's heart raced, but she forced herself to remain calm. Despite the fact that she had not yet completed her degree, Alexander approved her as a management trainee under Marcus at Knight Corporation. The formal part ended, but then his voice grew softer.
How is your mother's health? He asked. Elena blinked, caught off guard. She looked down at her hands. She's getting better, she replied shyly, then quickly stood, eager to escape. Thank you for the opportunity, sir. She walked out of the office, her feet light, but her heart pounding. Outside, she leaned against the wall, breathing fast. Get a hold of yourself, Elena, she whispered. You can't let him affect you like this. But she couldn't deny the truth. Alexander Knight had left a mark on her heart. The following week, Elena began her training at Knight Corporation under Marcus's guidance. She worked hard, kept her head low, and tried to avoid Alexander as much as possible. I'm here for my future, she reminded herself constantly, not to let my feelings confuse me. Every time she caught a glimpse of him in the hallways, her heart raced, but she forced herself to look away. At home, Mrs. Rose had finally been discharged from the hospital. She was weak but recovering well, and Elena thanked God every day for her mother's life. From her very first day at work, Elena noticed the eyes on her. Two women in particular made sure she felt out of place. Jessica was one of the senior staff. She was from a rich family, well-connected, and carried herself with pride. Everyone knew she had her eyes on Alexander, and she often boasted that she was the one meant for him. To her, Elena was just a poor girl who didn't belong. She made it clear by throwing sharp comments whenever she could.
Some people really don't know their place, Jessica said loudly one day, looking directly at Elena, thinking they can just walk into places meant for their betters. Sophia, another trainee, was different. She wore a sweet smile and acted friendly, but behind the smile were little traps. She would pretend to help Elena only to set her up for embarrassment later. Together, Jessica and Sophia watched Elena closely, whispering whenever she passed. Still, Elena pushed on. "I didn't come this far to be defeated by jealousy," she told herself firmly. One afternoon, Elena went with Marcus and a few others to visit a supplier. During the meeting, a cleaner accidentally spilled some water near the table. The supplier, irritated, turned and began insulting the man harshly. Before anyone else could speak, Elena stepped forward. "Please, sir, he didn't mean it. He's only trying to do his work. We should treat everyone with respect." The room went quiet. The supplier looked embarrassed, but quickly changed the topic. Alexander, who had been seated quietly, glanced at Elena. He said nothing in that moment, but later, in private, he told Marcus, "You made the right choice bringing her here." That evening, most staff had gone home, but Elena stayed behind to finish her reports. She thought she was alone until she heard a voice behind her. "You've been avoiding me." She turned quickly. It was Alexander, standing by the door. Elena's heart skipped. "Sir, I've just been busy," she said nervously. He walked closer, his expression softer than usual. "I respect your boundaries," he said quietly. "I only wanted to be friends." For the first time, they sat together and talked. The office felt strangely warm despite its cold glass walls. They spoke about school, about family, and little by little, the heaviness in Elena's chest eased. At one point, she noticed he refused the wine offered by a client earlier that evening. Curious, she asked, "You don't drink?" He shook his head. "I'm allergic to alcohol. Even a little could harm me." Elena smiled faintly. "That explains a lot." They shared a quiet moment, their eyes meeting, the silence saying what words could not. Elena left that night with her heart beating fast. "I promised myself to keep away from him," she thought, "but it's becoming harder with every passing day." The following week, Knight Corporation was invited to a supplier's cocktail party. The hall glittered with chandeliers, the sound of soft music filling the air. Staff mingled, glasses in hand, and business deals were whispered between smiles. Elena came along with Marcus and the other trainees, her heart still unsettled from the moment she had shared with Alexander. She kept her distance from him, reminding herself not to cross lines. But soon, tension filled the room. One of the big clients, a wealthy man with a loud voice and proud eyes, raised his glass toward Alexander. "Director Knight, if you want that discount, let's settle it like real men, through drinking dare. Whoever finishes wins. Refuse, and everyone will think you're too weak to stand with us."
Elena's heart nearly stopped. She remembered Alexander's quiet confession, his allergy to alcohol. Even a drop could harm him. His jaw tightened, pride warring with danger. Before he could speak, Elena stepped forward. Her voice shook at first, but then grew firm. "If fairness is the issue, then let's correct the deal openly," she said, looking the client directly in the eye. "I'll drink in his place, but in return, the terms must be adjusted, fair and transparent, with the discount made official." The crowd gasped. The client laughed loudly. "You, a girl? Fine, let's see what you're made of." Elena lifted the glass, her hands steady, though her palms sweated. "I can do this," she told herself, "for him." She sipped slowly, carefully, nursing the same drink, buying time. While the man boasted, she calmly pointed out the hidden clauses in the contract and pressed for changes. By the time her glass was empty, the room was silent. The contract was signed with fair terms. Alexander said nothing, but the look in his eyes was enough. Admiration, respect, something deeper. Later that night, Elena stepped outside for air. She was exhausted, her head light from the drink, but her spirit was steady. A sleek black car stopped beside her. The window rolled down. "Let me drop you home," Alexander said.
His tone was calm, almost gentle. Inside the car, the silence was thick. At last, he spoke softly. "Thank you. You saved me tonight." Elena looked away, her voice barely above a whisper. "I only did what was right." "No," he said quietly. "Not anyone, only you." When the car stopped at her street, she got out quickly. "Good night, sir." As the car drove off, Elena pressed her hand against her chest, her heart beating wildly. "Why do I feel this way?" she whispered to herself. "Why couldn't I watch him suffer? Am I falling for him?" She shook her head hard, hurrying into the night, but no matter how much she tried, the thought refused to leave her. The next morning, whispers began to run through the office. Sophia, who had seen Elena leave the cocktail party in Alexander's car, leaned close to another trainee and smirked. "Did you see who dropped her off last night? The CEO himself. They're too close, don't you think?" The words spread quickly like smoke. By noon, the whole floor was buzzing with gossip. Elena kept her head down, refusing to explain herself. But Jessica's eyes were sharp and full of anger. "That poor little intern, she's getting too comfortable. We need to put her back in her place." That afternoon, Jessica called Elena into her office. She wore her usual confident smile, the kind that never reached her eyes. "Make sure you cut the power before you leave tonight, understood?" Elena hesitated. She had already learned the hard way that verbal instructions could be twisted. "Ma'am, could you please send that in a message, just so I don't forget?" Jessica raised an eyebrow, but quickly typed a short instruction on her phone and sent it. Elena felt a little safer with the proof tucked away. The next morning, chaos broke out. The company had lost important data overnight, millions gone because the power was cut. All eyes turned toward Elena. Jessica stood in the center of the office, her voice ringing loud. "You cut the power without permission. Do you realize what you've done? This company has lost so much because of your carelessness. You good-for-nothing intern, you're fired." Elena's face went pale. Her legs felt weak, but she forced herself to stand tall. "That's not true," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "You told me to do it. I even asked you to confirm in writing." Jessica's eyes flickered with surprise, then narrowed. She shook her head slowly. "You dare to lie? Produce evidence then. Otherwise, I will have you removed from this building immediately." The whole office fell silent, waiting. Elena's hands trembled as she held up her phone. "I have it right here," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "The message you sent me." But when she scrolled to show the message, her breath caught in her throat. The message was gone. Her mind flashed back to earlier that morning. Sophia had met her warmly in the staff room, acting unusually kind. Elena had dropped her phone while searching her bag, and Sophia had quickly picked it up, smiling sweetly as she handed it back. That was when the message was deleted, Elena realized, her heart sinking. They planned this together. Elena's chest tightened. She had no way to defend herself. The murmurs in the office grew louder. Jessica folded her arms, smirking. "See, no proof. She's lying." Tears pricked Elena's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I'm telling the truth," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I would never lie about something like this." Just when she thought all hope was lost, Marcus stepped forward. "Enough," Marcus said firmly. "Let's check the CCTV footage." Jessica's face twitched. The security team pulled up the recordings, and this time with audio. The office filled with Jessica's voice, clear as day. "Make sure you cut the power before you leave." Gasps filled the room. Alexander, who had been silent all along, stepped forward. His voice was cold, controlled, yet full of authority. "Jessica, you have not only endangered this company, but you also tried to frame a junior staff member. Effective immediately, you are demoted. Your salary will be cut in half for the next 6 months. Any more misconduct, and you're out." Jessica's face burned with shame. Sophia looked down quickly, pretending innocence. Alexander turned to Elena, his voice calmer. Learn something from this. Always keep written confirmations. In this world, paper trails protect you. Elena nodded weakly, her heart heavy with relief. Thank you, sir, she said quietly, her voice filled with gratitude. As the staff dispersed, Alexander stood a few steps away, his gaze lingering on her. Guilt tugged at him. He had started this unspoken bond between them, and yet he knew she wanted distance. He respected it. Still, no matter how hard he tried, he could not stop being drawn to her. After Alexander's mourning and Jessica's demotion, Elena could finally breathe a little. The stares and whispers in the office were still there, but the open bullying eased. At least I can focus on my work now, she told herself, walking into the office with a lighter heart. For the first time in weeks, she walked into work without dread pressing on her chest. But while her battles grew quieter, storms were rising around Alexander. At a high-level strategy meeting, the heavy wooden doors swung open. Uncle Richard and his son Daniel strode in with smug expressions. They weren't supposed to be there, but they had chosen this moment deliberately. "Alexander," Uncle Richard said with a mocking smile, "your decisions are costing this family. The shareholders aren't happy. Maybe it's time the company was handled by real knight power." Daniel crossed his arms, adding fuel. "The press already knows. I've told them how you can't run this place without the family. People will see the truth soon enough." Murmurs spread across the room, and Alexander's jaw tightened. He knew this wasn't about strategy, it was about humiliation. He kept his composure, but inside the weight pressed harder than ever. That evening, far away from boardrooms and power struggles, Elena prepared a simple meal in her small kitchen. She had invited Grandmother Catherine over for a homemade meal. When Grandmother Catherine arrived, Elena greeted her with genuine warmth and led her into the house. "Mama, this is Madame Catherine. She's been a kind benefactor to me." Mrs. Rose's eyes filled with gratitude. She struggled to stand and then sank to her knees before Catherine. "Thank you, Ma. God bless you for looking after my child." Grandmother Catherine quickly lifted her, her voice gentle but firm. "No need for this, my dear. You've raised a kind-hearted daughter. That is thanks enough." They shared a meal, simple but filled with laughter and comfort. For a moment, Elena felt like she had family beyond her mother. When Grandmother Catherine was ready to leave, Elena walked her to the door, but Catherine paused, noticing the worry clouding Elena's face. "Child," she said softly, "what troubles you?" Elena hesitated, then whispered, "It's Alexander. He's under so much pressure. His uncle, his cousin, they make things harder for him. I don't know why, but it pains me to see him like this."
Grandmother Catherine's eyes softened. She reached for Elena's hand. "You truly care for him," she said with a knowing smile. Elena looked down, her cheeks flushing. "I shouldn't. We're from different worlds." Catherine's voice grew calm and wise. "Storms make strong sailors, Elena. Don't fear the winds. They only shape a man who is meant to stand tall." Elena lowered her eyes, her heart racing. "Maybe I do care for him," she thought quietly, "more than I should." That night, after the humble dinner with Grandmother Catherine, her words, "Storms make strong sailors," lingered in Elena's heart. But before dawn, the storm arrived. The next day at the office, Elena was filing documents late when she overheard a voice in the corridor. She froze. It was Daniel. His tone was low but arrogant, the kind of voice that carried pride even in whispers. "Don't worry," Daniel said into his phone. "The old woman won't be around for long. I fixed her supplements. Soon she'll be out of the way and Alexander will finally stumble." Elena's blood ran cold. Her hands shook as she pressed against the wall, trying not to make a sound. He tampered with Grandmother Catherine's medicine, she realized, panic flooding through her. Without thinking twice, she rushed to find Alexander. Alexander was in his office going through reports when Elena burst in. Her face was pale, her breath uneven. "What's wrong?" he asked, standing immediately. "I heard Daniel," Elena stammered, her words tumbling out. "He said he tampered with Grandmother Catherine's supplements. Alexander, I think she's in danger." Alexander's expression hardened, his calm mask breaking into urgency. Without wasting a second, he grabbed his car keys. "Let's go." They arrived at the Knight mansion just in time. As they rushed through the grand hall, a scream echoed from upstairs. "Madame Catherine collapsed," one servant cried. Alexander's heart dropped. He and Elena pushed through and found her on the floor, her skin clammy, her breath shallow. "Call the driver. Get the car ready," Alexander barked, lifting his grandmother in his arms as though she weighed nothing. They sped to the hospital. Doctors rushed her into emergency care, machines beeping, staff running around. For a moment, it felt as though time had frozen. Elena stood at Alexander's side, her hands clasped tightly in prayer. "Please, God, don't take her. Not like this." After what felt like forever, the doctor stepped out. "She's stable for now," he said, "but her collapse wasn't natural. The supplements she's been taking were tampered with." Alexander's fists clenched. He already knew who was behind it. His eyes burned with fury. But when he turned, he saw Elena, her face full of worry, her eyes wet but strong. Grandmother Catherine, half conscious, whispered when they entered her room, her voice faint but steady. "Someone close tried to kill me. Be careful. The storm is here." Alexander held her hand tightly, his other hand brushing his forehead. For the first time in years, his walls felt thin, and standing beside him was Elena, who had been brave enough to tell him the truth. "Thank you," he said quietly, looking at her with an intensity she had never seen before. "You saved her life." Elena's heart swelled, but she only nodded, unable to find the right words. Once Alexander was sure Grandmother Catherine was safe in the hospital, anger surged through him like fire. "I can't let this go," his voice said, low and dangerous. He called a private meeting at the Knight mansion, summoning Uncle Richard and Daniel. Elena stayed close, but quietly. She knew Catherine's heart couldn't take the full truth yet, so when Catherine asked about Daniel, Elena only smiled. But suspicion already lived in her wise eyes. That evening, Grandmother Catherine staged a test. She called Daniel and Uncle Richard to her study, pretending to be weak, pretending she was ready to sign over more assets. A document was placed before her. A hidden recorder captured every word.
"Daniel," she said slowly, "I'm considering transferring my holdings. Maybe it's time." Daniel's face lit up with greedy hope. Under pressure, his mask slipped. "You should have done this long ago," he said bitterly. "I deserve it after all the years I've been ignored. You always favored Alexander. Yes, we're both your grandchildren, but you love him more." Catherine's hand trembled, not from weakness, but from heartbreak. "Alexander only has me, child. You had your parents. That doesn't mean I ever loved you less, but love is not the same as trust." Daniel clenched his fists, realizing too late that he had confessed. With steady resolve, Catherine executed the real documents, moving her major assets fully to Alexander. The recorder had everything. Uncle Richard said nothing, but the shame on his face was clear. When Alexander heard the recording, his face was stone. No emotion, no satisfaction, just cold silence. He signed the papers and left the room, his shoulders stiff with anger. Elena followed him to the corridor. Her voice was soft but firm. "Alexander, don't carry this bitterness forever," she said, touching her arm gently. "I know they wronged you. I know you feel betrayed, but if you hold on to this anger, it will eat you alive.
Heal, not for them, but for yourself. Alexander turned, his eyes dark with pain, but for a brief moment her words broke through. He didn't answer, only nodded once, the smallest of nods, before walking away. Elena stood there, realizing just how entangled she had become in the Knight family storm, and how much she cared, more than she ever planned to. The days that followed were quieter for Elena, but Jessica's eyes burned with silent rage. Each time she saw Alexander's gaze linger, however briefly, on Elena, her jealousy deepened. "She's just a poor trainee," she muttered to Sophia. "She doesn't belong here. I need to get rid of her." When word spread that Elena was leading a charity drive for elders and schoolchildren, Jessica smiled coldly. To everyone else, it looked like kindness. To Jessica, it was the perfect chance to strike. Knight Corporation organized a gala to present the donations. Guests filled the hall in glittering gowns and sharp suits, music flowing softly in the background. Elena stood by the side of the stage, nervous but hopeful. "I've worked so hard for this. Everything will be fine." She had poured her whole heart into the project, carefully recording every item, every purchase. Then Jessica struck. She marched on stage holding a folder, her voice loud and sharp. "This so-called charity is a cover-up. Elena has been embezzling funds. If she's innocent, let her show receipts." The hall buzzed with whispers. Elena's hands shook, but she held up her phone. "Here are the e-receipts," she said, her voice trembling slightly as she projected them onto the screen. Jessica scoffed. "Fake. Anyone can create documents on a computer." The whispers grew louder. Panic threatened to choke Elena. "This can't be happening," she thought, her heart pounding. "I did everything right." But Alexander was ready. Unknown to her, he had anticipated such a move. He rose from his seat and signaled to the doors. Moments later, elderly beneficiaries and schoolchildren entered the hall, carrying the very supplies Elena had distributed. Behind them came directors from welfare centers, orphanages, and relief stations. One by one, they stepped forward. "This food fed our widows. These coats kept our children warm. These books came exactly as promised." Every item was accounted for. Every word confirmed Elena's honesty. Then the doors opened again, and this time police officers walked in. Alexander's calm voice cut through the stunned silence. "There has been forgery, conspiracy, and false claims made tonight. The evidence points to Jessica and Daniel." Jessica's face drained of color. Daniel tried to slip away, but officers caught him.
"This is a misunderstanding," Jessica protested. "We were tricked." But the handcuffs closed. The gala hall turned back to Elena. Guests who had whispered against her now offered apologies. One director spoke for many. "We are sorry. We judged too quickly." Elena's voice trembled as she replied, "I only did my part. This was not just me. It was the Knight Corporation team and Director Knight who quietly supported me all along." The applause that followed was genuine. Alexander remained in his seat, his expression unreadable. But inside, he felt something shift. "She's different," he thought, watching her with admiration. "She might be the only one who truly sees me, beyond the name, beyond the wealth, beyond the storms." After Jessica and Daniel's arrest, the office felt different. The whispers died down, and even Sophia seemed changed. One afternoon, she approached Elena quietly. Her usual sly smile was gone. "Elena," she said, voice low, I'm sorry. I was part of things I shouldn't have been. I let jealousy blind me." Elena studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "I forgive you, Sophia," she said gently. "Let's just do better from here." Sophia's eyes softened with relief. "Thank you. You didn't have to forgive me, but you did." It was the first time Elena had seen sincerity in her. That night, Alexander asked Elena to stay back after a board review. They stood alone in his office, the city lights spilling through the tall windows. His shoulders were tense, his face tired. "I don't often say this," he admitted, voice low,
but sometimes I feel like I can't breathe in this family. The weight never leaves." Elena looked at him, and for once she didn't see the powerful billionaire everyone feared. She saw a lonely man carrying too much. Her chest tightened. "You're stronger than you think," she whispered, stepping closer. "You've carried this burden alone for so long, but you don't have to anymore." Their eyes met, and the air between them grew heavy. Before she could stop herself, their lips touched. It was soft, uncertain, but real. The moment broke Elena's resolve. She pulled back, heart racing, then stormed out of the office. "What have I done?" she thought, tears streaming down her face. "I can't do this." That night she lay awake, shame and longing fighting in her chest. By morning, she had made her decision. She walked into HR with trembling hands and submitted her resignation. When Alexander heard, he confronted her immediately. "Why?" he demanded, his voice filled with confusion and pain. "After everything?" Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Because I've done the one thing I shouldn't. I've fallen for you, and I'm not qualified. Not by degree, not by background, not by anything. Staying close to you will only ruin me." Alexander stared at her, stunned. Then, slowly, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled sheet of paper. Her breath caught. It was the handwritten note from that night. "I kept it," he said softly. "Your rules. I followed every one of them. It took everything in me to stay away. I hate that night, Elena. I hate what brought us together, but I never disrespected you, and I don't want that to be our story." Her lips trembled. "Alexander?" He stepped closer, his voice steady but full of longing. "Give me a chance to love you rightly," he said, his eyes pleading. "No secrets, no shame. Just us." Elena's heart pounded so loudly it felt like the whole room could hear it. "I don't know if I can," she whispered. "I'm afraid." "Then be afraid with me," he said gently. "But don't walk away." After Alexander's confession and the sight of that crumpled note, proof that he'd kept every rule she'd set that terrible, desperate night, Elena's heart had been in turmoil. She couldn't deny her feelings anymore, but fear clung to her like a shadow. Can I truly walk into his world? Will I always be seen as unworthy? She ran from him without a word, but she knew she couldn't escape it forever. At night, she tossed and turned. In class, she couldn't concentrate. Even at the office, where she tried to bury herself in reports, her mind betrayed her.
One evening, she visited Grandmother Catherine at the mansion after her discharge from the hospital. The older woman's strength was returning, and her smile lit up the room. Elena tried to hide her restlessness, but Catherine's eyes were too wise. She reached for Elena's hand. "Child," she said gently, "I have watched you stand by my grandson when others plotted against him. You did not run. You did not seek gain. I want no other granddaughter-in-law but you." Elena's eyes widened, tears rushing to her lashes. "Grandma," she whispered, "but we didn't start right. What if he doesn't see me as worth it?" Grandmother Catherine shook her head slowly. "Listen to me, Elena. Love is not about where you start, but how you grow. Alexander needs someone who truly sees him, not his money, and that person is you." Catherine's words filled her with hope, but also fear. At home, Mrs. Rose noticed her daughter's distracted face. Over dinner, she asked softly, "Elena, what's weighing on you? Is it the young man I've seen in your eyes lately?" Elena lowered her head, fingers twisting her spoon. "Mama," she said quietly, "Alexander and I'm afraid. What if he never sees me as worth it?" She didn't say exactly what had happened between them, but her mother's eyes softened as though she already understood. Mrs. Rose reached across the table, squeezing her daughter's hand. "My child, two hearts that long for each other will always find a way to be together. I have seen the way he looks at you.
That is not pity, that is value. Don't let fear bury what God may be building." Elena's tears spilled freely. Then, for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where Alexander truly chose her, not out of guilt, not out of duty, but out of love. The weight on Elena's heart did not disappear overnight, but the voices of both her mother and grandmother Catherine stayed with her like a quiet melody. Two hearts that long for each other will always find a way to be together. And Catherine's words, "I want no other granddaughter-in-law but you." Those words gave her courage, even if she was still afraid. A week later, Grandmother Catherine hosted a private family dinner. There were no journalists, no board members, no outsiders, just family. Elena and Mrs. Rose were invited, and the warmth of the invitation itself calmed some of Elena's fears. The dining room glowed softly under golden lights. The table was filled with rich meals, but the true sweetness came from the laughter and peace in the room. For the first time in years, the Knight family felt like a family. Uncle Richard, who had once fought so hard against Alexander, rose slowly from his chair. His voice carried humility Elena had never heard from him. "Alexander," he said quietly, "I was wrong. Ambition blinded me. I let pride tear this family apart. I'm sorry for everything. From today, I'll do my part to support you, not fight you." The silence was heavy for a moment. Then Grandmother Catherine's eyes softened with relief. Even Alexander gave a quiet nod, his heart finally beginning to release old anger. Days later, Elena sat for her final exams. She studied hard, poured her energy into every answer, and when it was done, she walked out of the hall with a deep breath of freedom. "I did it," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "I actually did it." Graduation came soon after. The hall buzzed with excitement, students in gowns tossing caps into the air. Elena clutched her certificate, tears in her eyes. "I made it, not just for myself, but for Mama." Then the hall fell silent. Alexander walked in. No bodyguards, no boardroom suit, just a simple, elegant man who carried quiet power. He moved straight through the rows of students until he stood before her. Gasps rippled through the hall, whispers spread like fire. "Is that Alexander Knight?" Then, to everyone's shock, he knelt on one knee. He opened a small box, the diamond ring sparkling under the lights. His voice was steady but full of feeling. "Elena Stevens," he said, looking into her eyes. "No contracts, no bargains. If you say yes, it's forever." Elena's heart pounded so hard it almost broke her ribs. Tears blurred her vision. "Yes, Alexander," she whispered, her voice filled with joy. "Yes, 1,000 times yes!" The hall erupted in cheers. Some girls covered their mouths, whispering, "She's the luckiest girl alive!" Others clapped wildly, their faces glowing.
At the back, Marcus smiled to himself. His little matchmaking trick at the pharmacy had blossomed into something even he hadn't imagined. Mrs. Rose lifted her hands with trembling joy. "May God bless this union," she said, tears streaming down her face. "May your love bring healing where there was once pain." Weeks later, the scene was far from ballrooms and champagne. Alexander and Elena walked hand in hand at a quiet charity visit, their simple clothes blending with the laughter of children. They bent down together, handing out books and food. Their smiles were wide, their eyes shining. "This is what matters," Elena said softly. "Not the wealth or the status, just being able to help others." Alexander squeezed her hand. "I never understood that until I met you," he said quietly. "You changed everything for me." This was their new beginning, a love not built on secrets or bargains, but on truth,
a love that had weathered storms and come out stronger. Hand in hand, side by side, forever.